Oh, you're good to me.
Okay.
Perfect.
And Greg has everything set up for you to be able to speak from here.
Okay.
And then, Marcus will come up and he'll take over.
I made a few editorial changes.
No, it's fine. I just sent you the basic stuff. You can say whatever you want to. Mary Ann caught up last time. She's like, they know who I am. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like your GPS tells you how to get out of your neighborhood. I just made the same thing for everybody.
Appreciate you. All right. I'll come back up at 11:30.
All right.
I got 10 minutes to go around and say hi.
you're on now.
Okay.
Okay. There is that. You can put that in your pocket.
Perfect.
Okay.
Oh, already, it's on and we're all awake. Okay. Good morning and happy Nurses Week to each of you and your colleagues who are caring for patients and working with other team members back in your individual areas at the moment. It is a great privilege for me to welcome you here today, to have us spend some time together, and to think a little bit about what the power of presence means. One thing I was asked to update you all on is that if you haven't done it yet, is to complete the research puzzle that went out in one of the links, because we have some iPads and scrubs to give away. So I would highly encourage that opportunity, because that will all go into the raffle. And then, why are we here today? Well, we're here to celebrate the work you do each and every day, right? It's more than a day, it's more than a week, because the presence of what we all give to our patients and colleagues is critically important. So on behalf of the Friends of Nursing, I am pleased to have this opportunity to introduce you all to Marcus Engel. He is here presenting to our health system. He's doing 4 different lectures across our system, and he kicked it off last night. And he brings a unique perspective that each of us can think about, putting caring into practice, right? And you've heard that before. But I think as we think about our theme this year and what he's going to share with us, it really does help us tie together our professional practice model and putting some of these key things into practice. Marcus will share his story with you from his real-life experience. And I think that's the critical part of real-life experience and what that means. It's not theory, it's not academic, it's his reality. It's a journey that isn't always pretty, but one that he's here to help each of us understand and our vital role that we play in caring for patients. Marcus holds a BS in sociology from Missouri State University and a master's in narrative medicine from Columbia University in New York City. He has authored 4 books, one of which you're going to be receiving today, which are being used at nursing schools and other types of schools across the country to help connect people back and help them enter into a profession we are so proud of. He's received an honorary doctorate from Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine and is adjunct faculty at the University of Notre Dame, where he teaches pre-med students the art of being with. Marcus and his wife, Marveline, are the co-founders of the I'm Here movement, a reminder of presence, which is changing the culture of care through 2 simple words, which I believe he will illuminate for you later today. He lives in Orlando, Florida, with his wife, and also Elliot, who is here with him today. And so Elliot is his seeing eye dog, and he is very wonderful. I had the opportunity to pet him last night, and then I quickly got home to my own dogs who thought, Tracy, we are going to have a discussion. But with that being said, and all joking aside, I am very grateful for Marcus and his work and him being able to share his story with us about what those 2 words are that you'll learn about, but also what presence means to our colleagues and our patients. So please join me in welcoming him to the stage to tell his story.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. Hi. How y'all doing? Happy Nurses Week. Nurses Week is like Christmas week for me, and I'm not even a nurse, right? So I'm not a nurse. I just love them. So this is Elliot. Thank you. I have to introduce Elliot because if I don't, he'll get hacked off at me and he'll walk me out in front of a truck. So Elliot's still kind of a puppy. He just turned 3 in March. I've had him just since January of last year, so he's still kind of new and learning the ropes. And Elliot is my 4th seeing eye dog. So he hasn't been with me very long, but I've gotten all of my dogs from the same training facility up in Morristown, New Jersey. And so I've been going there for 20 years. They know that this is what I do. I have the honor and privilege of lecturing around the country at hospitals and nursing conferences and conventions and association meetings and physician grand rounds, et cetera, et cetera. And so I guess they figured since I am a speaker, I also need a dog who is a speaker. And Elliot is the most vocal dog I have ever been around. And he doesn't really bark, but this dog will whimper and whine and moan and groan. And he'll probably be doing it today. And so just understand if he starts to get interruptive, it's just kind of who he is. So you gonna be cool? Thank you. All right. So as Tracy said in my introduction, I got a master's a few years ago in a field called narrative medicine. Has anybody heard of narrative medicine? If you have not, it's not real surprising. It's a very new and still kind of emerging field. There's only one master's level program in the country. That's at Columbia in New York. And when my class graduated, I was in the class of 2012. We were only the third class to actually complete this master's program. So narrative medicine, what is it? Well, that's the good question. What we do in the work of narrative is we take the stories of healthcare and we try to turn those stories into something that people can learn from. My specific work in this field is called narrative nursing, and what I do in narrative nursing is try to encourage nurses to use writing and journaling as a therapeutic practice, hopefully for warding off compassion fatigue and burnout. If you want to know more about that, you can look at narrativenursing.com. So it's all about the story, and today I get to share part of my story with you. So where is the best place to start a story? Beginning. Seems like a pretty good place to start, right? Okay, and by the way, this is going to be probably the most informal speech you ever attend. Is that okay? Good. All right. So there's the beginning. Okay, so let's see, I just turned 43 last week. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. I actually grew up in Ferguson, Missouri, until I was about 10 years old. When I was in the 4th grade, my family decided to torture we children by moving us from the suburbs to a farm. My real hometown is High Hill, Missouri, population 250. That was the population when I was growing up. It has since shrunk to 197. So growing up small town, I was not the person that you see in front of you today. When I was coming up, I lived an existence probably similar to some of you. Throughout high school, I was involved in all the typical things of band and choir, National Honor Society. Played 4 years of varsity football on the offensive line. And I knew that whenever it came time for me to go off to college, growing up in such a small town, I wanted a big college experience. I wanted some diversity in my life. So chose to go to the 2nd largest university in the state. Missouri State moved out of a town of 200 people into a dorm with 900. Culture shock for this small town boy, right? Now, your first 6 weeks of college, what do you do? Good, you're my kind of people. There's always that one person that's like, I studied. It's like, you did not. Okay, so my first 6 weeks of college, that's what I was doing, going to parties, meeting girls, probably not going to class as much as I should have been. And about 6 weeks into my freshman year of college, I got homesick. This is where you all say, aw. Thank you. That wasn't forced, right? So I came home for the weekend, and on a Saturday night, I ended up hooking up with 3 friends who I had met during my high school years when we all attended the same church camp together. Had a great time. That Saturday night, we ended up scoring 4 fifth-row seats to the season opener between the St. Louis Blues and Ottawa Senators hockey teams. Had a great time at that game, and it was after the game that a little something happened that changed me from that typical 18-year-old college freshman into a little more the person you see in front of you today. Now, we left the hockey game that night. My buddy Tom was driving, I was riding shotgun, and our 2 friends, Kim and Vince, were in the back seat. And I always tell people that after the game, we were going back to Tom's house. That's not true. We were going to White Castle. I love White Castle, right? You guys have White Castle here? Why do you live here? Okay. Actually, we were at, where were we this morning? Raleigh this morning. And believe it or not, they had White Castles in the vending machine. Don't see that very often. So anyway, we're going to White Castle. Again, Tom is driving, I'm riding in the front passenger seat. We're headed south down a street called Hampton Avenue, and we pull up to the intersection of a cross street called Chippewa Avenue, whereupon we have a red light. So what do you do at a red light? Stop. Well, as we're slowing to stop, that light turns green. So Tom shifts the car into second, and we proceed out into the intersection. Now, from my vantage point, sitting in the front passenger seat, when we pull into that intersection, I should be able to look out my right-hand side window here and see all the cars that are coming down the street at me, right? That's what should happen. When I turned and looked out that window, the only thing I could see was a pair of headlights that were about that far from my face. And that quick, those lights went out. This is probably not going to be a big surprise to you, but I am not a healthcare professional. Shocking, right? I mean, you don't want me starting an IV on anybody. You really don't want me doing anything with a Foley. So I am not a healthcare professional, and you guys are, so bear with me, because I have not had all those anatomy and physiology and biomed classes that you guys have taken. So from the moment that I saw those headlights, I went into shock. What's the medical definition of shock? I don't know, because I'm not a healthcare professional, right? So here's my layman's definition. See if this works for you. Shock is a gift. It's a gift that the human body receives when an experience is so traumatic that our brain needs to block out the memory of that experience. Does that seem fair enough for a layman like me? Okay, so if that's the case, I only got a very small portion of this gift. I don't remember the impact. I don't remember our car barrel rolling 3 or 4 times through that intersection. Car came to land on its roof off to the side of the street. I don't remember that. And I don't have any recollection of how myself nor my 3 friends got out of that vehicle. However, once I was outside the car, that's when that gift of shock was gone, and that's when I came right back into the here and now. When I came to, I was laying face down, stomach down, chest down in the street. And when I came to, I could feel all the bones in my face just crushed. If you think about taking an aluminum can, crumple it up as tight as you can, that's how my face was feeling. How many of you guys have ever broken a bone? How many of you are raising your hands at a blind guy? More than one? Do I need to reintroduce my senile? All right, so if you've broken a bone, or if you're lucky enough to have gotten this far in life and you've never broken a bone, I think one thing that we all know is that when bones break, they do not tend to do so slowly and gradually, right? Bones tend to break instantaneously, accompanied by what? Pain, right? So what is the human reaction to instantaneous and horrific pain? If you broke your leg right now, what's the first thing you're going to do? Scream, except that I can't scream at this time because my mouth is so filled with blood and broken teeth and gasoline that I can't pull any oxygen down into my lungs. And I can very vividly remember trying to spit this mess out onto the pavement to open up an airway. And once I was able to pull in that first lungful of oxygen and expel that scream, when that scream came out, I could tell that my left jaw was hanging off of its hinge. That is the moment when I thought I was going to die. Obviously, and luckily, that did not happen, but it was close. Paramedics got to the scene, scooped me up, rushed me to the emergency room at Barnes Hospital. This is now known as Barnes Jewish Hospital. This is the teaching hospital associated with Washington University School of Medicine. They pull me into the emergency room, and trauma team immediately starts to go to work on me. Now, I will be the first one to tell you that my memories of being in the emergency room that night are pretty sketchy. I had the gift of unconsciousness during portions of the night, and then there were other parts that I can actually remember. But there are 2 things I recall very distinctly. Number 1 was having my clothing cut off. And that made a big impact on me because I'm a little bit of a diva. Second thing I remember was Jennifer. Jennifer, throughout that entire night, sat by my bed and held my hand. And every time I came back into consciousness and she could tell that I was awake, she would say the same things to me every time. She'd say, "Marcus, my name is Jennifer. You were in a car accident. You're in the hospital." Bare bones information, right? That's all I could take. But throughout that night, as she held my hand, Jennifer kept repeating the two most compassionate words I think any human being can say to another. Over and over, she just kept saying, I'm here. I'm here, Marcus, I'm here. I didn't even know where here was, but I knew that in this world that had been turned inside out, upside down, and bludgeoned, I knew that I was not alone. Now, I'm going to tell you something that you already inherently know. Agree or disagree with this statement. Simple human presence is the cornerstone of caregiving. Agree? I'll take that a step further. That presence is the very foundation of our humanity. When you, as a human being, can recognize suffering and vulnerability in another human being and be present and empathetic during that person's time of need, that is essentially what separates us from everyone else in the animal kingdom, is that ability to be present. Anybody want to take a guess what Jennifer's position was in the emergency room? Nurse, always a great guess, right? I sometimes hear chaplain. I sometimes hear social worker. I sometimes hear your mom, which would be ridiculous since my mom's name is Nancy. And the truth of the matter is, I've never known anything about Jennifer. 20 years go by, I've known nothing about Jennifer's. I've never known her last name. I've never known her position in the emergency room. I have, in fact, written books like this one called I'm Here, based on the power of presence and that brief experience with Jennifer. And yet, even my family had to ask what I think is a completely legitimate question, which was she really even real, right? I was on a lot of dope that night. There is every chance that I could have hallucinated her. So let me take you back in time. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was invited by the very facility that saved my life, Barnes Jewish Hospital, to come in and speak for their patient experience efforts. And Barnes, roughly the same size as Duke here, over 1,000 beds, I want to say like 13,000 employees maybe. And they couldn't get everybody into one room at one time to hear me. So Barnes ended up booking me to speak 5 times a day for 5 days in a row. I slept good when that was over. But on the second day of being there, I got a little renewed energy when I got done giving a keynote, and the director of the patient experience department came up front, and she said some words that I will never forget. She said, Marcus, we've got a surprise for you. We found Jennifer. And for the first time in 2 decades, I finally got to hold her hands again, and I finally got to say thank you. Thank you for never letting go of my hand. Thank you for staying with me on what was absolutely the worst night of my life. And as you can probably imagine, I had a million questions for Jennifer. And my first question was, you remember? And she said, Marcus, I remember it like it was yesterday. I said, okay, so who were you way back when? And she said, well, the night that you came in, I was 20, and I was a patient care tech here in the emergency room. I was studying to be a paramedic. Now, a 20-year-old patient care tech. I think in our world, those of us with even a small amount of good sense, one of the things that we strive for is equality of all people, right? At the same time, though, we have to recognize that whether it's in, well, basically any kind of institution, whether it's corporate America, it's in academia, it's in the military, it's in families, it's in society, it's really in healthcare, there's usually some type of system of hierarchy set up, right? In our world of healthcare, where does a 20-year-old anyone rank on that totem pole? Not real high, right? I mean, Jennifer didn't have years and years of experience behind her. She didn't have years of higher education. She didn't have a whole alphabet soup after her name. And yet, the one thing that she could do was the one thing that made the biggest impact on me, that ability to be present. So my next question for Jennifer was, okay, so who are you now? And she said, well, Marcus, the next morning when my shift ended, I had to let go of your hand and I left you in the surgical intensive care unit. She said, today, I'm the clinical nurse manager for that same SICU. And since the time that we were reintroduced a few years ago, Jenny has continued to move up in the ranks to where today she is the director of the very emergency department where she first held my hand so many nights ago. And more than anything these days, I am just proud that I can call her my friend. You want to know the best part of the story? Actually, that was the best part of the story. Second best part of the story was the fact that my wife, Marveline, was there, and Marveline got a 2-minute heads up that this was going to be happening, which gave her just enough time to whip out her trusty iPhone, and she was able to catch our reunion on video. And if you want to see that video, you can go to imheremovement.org, imheremovement.org, and if you can make it through the Marcus Meets Jenny video without crying, you're a stronger person than I am. So what is the I'm Here movement? Simply put, we're just a reminder. We're just a reminder that no matter who we are, no matter what your position, what your level of education, what your profession, we all have that ability to be present for another human being during their time of suffering. Something we all can do, right? Part of the I'm Here movement is these nifty I'm Here movement bands. And we have these for a couple of different reasons. First, we wear these to remind ourselves to be mindfully present, always, in this moment. And the second thing I want to see is that these bands become so branded within the world of healthcare that when you're standing in line at Starbucks and the guy behind you in line sees that you've got one of these bands on your wrist, he thinks, that's the kind of person who takes care of me when I can't take care of myself. And then hopefully that guy offers to pick up the tab for your mocha frappuccino latte thing with a twist. Anybody want one of these? Catch. Did you catch it? Okay. Good, that's awesome, because I am not much of a quarterback. Good job, tight end receiver. And by the way, there's plenty of bands. Feel free to grab some at the book table afterwards. And again, we wear these to remind ourselves just to be present. But even that may not be the best part of the story. So I told you Elliot here has only been with me for a little over a year, right? So Elliot, like I said, is my fourth dog. Elliot's predecessor is also a yellow lab named Garrett. And Garrett was with me for 6 years. In the 6 years that Garrett was by my side, that dog and I flew over 1 million airline miles together. I think we visited 45 states together. Lived in New York City, navigated Manhattan every day for a year that I was in grad school. Never once did we get hit by a car. And so when it was time for Garrett to retire, taking off his harness for the last time is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But the one piece of comfort that I took away from that was as soon as Garrett went into permanent retirement, he was immediately adopted by Jennifer and her family. And today, Garrett is living the happy life of a retired service dog just outside of St. Louis, where he is now allowed to be fat and lazy in his golden years like we all should be. And I believe that that is what we call a full circle. So I woke up that next morning, Jennifer was gone. I woke up to a world where I could not see, I couldn't hear. Everything I heard sounded like I was deep underwater, couldn't smell, couldn't taste. And the only thing I could feel was this incredible pressure. Felt like somebody had taken a loaded semi, dropped it on my body from about 10 stories high. Now you wake up tomorrow morning basically void of your 5 senses. Do you think you may have some questions? Such as? What happened, right? Well, here's the deal. Oh, actually, let's go back in time. And I don't mean like 4 or 5 years. I mean to like the late 1800s, early 1900s. There was this French surgeon / scientist named Lefort. And Lefort was a bit of a gruesome dude. He used to go out onto battlefields. He would pick up cannonballs and drop those cannonballs on the faces of cadavers. And he did this in order to study how the bones of the face would break. So to this day, we still use Lefort's name in our classification system, and we have, in progressive order, a Lefort 1, 2, and 3. I have what my plastic surgeon described as a Lefort 3 plus, 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 plus. His words, not mine. By the time the paramedics got to the scene, my airways were compromised, and the lead paramedic on that crew had to perform a procedure that is the last-ditch effort to save human life. Anybody know what that is? It's a trach, except when it's done in the field, it's called crike. And there in that intersection, unsterile environment, gasoline everywhere, 3 miles away from a level 1 trauma center, that medic had to make the incision in my throat that is the reason that I am alive and standing in front of you today. A few years ago, I became friends with a trauma nurse out of Terre Haute, Indiana. Her name is Mary. And when Mary learned that I had been criked in the field, she said, Marcus, do you know how rare that is? No, I'm not a healthcare professional. And she said, I've been a trauma nurse for 35 years and I've seen 2. There's a lot of people who have saved my life. But if it hadn't been for that medic, again, I would not be here. So when I found out how rare this is, I knew I had to find this individual. And so thanks to the magic of Facebook, and also because I'm a little bit of a stalker, I was able to track this gentleman down. And strangely enough, he and I share a name. His name is also Mark. And it's got to be kind of weird for Mark the paramedic to be hearing from Marcus the blind guy from 20 some odd years ago, right? If you're Mark the paramedic, don't you think you might be wondering, dude, what do you want from me? And so I made it very apparent in our first communications. I said, I don't want anything from you. The only thing I want is to shake your hand, to tell you thank you, and to hear if you have any memories of that experience. I said, I'm going to be back in St. Louis in a couple of weeks. Can we meet? And he said, sure, where do you want to meet? And I said, well, why don't we meet where we met? And it was on the corner of that intersection that Mark was able to point out where he remembered finding my body and his memories of that brief experience. And the part that I will never forget was asking him, I said, Mark, you were a medic for 19 years. In all your time as a medic, how many crikes did you ever do? And I hadn't even gotten the question out of my mouth, and he was saying, just one. Just one. Agree or disagree with this statement. In our world of healthcare, EMS professionals are those who typically get the least amount of gratitude shown for their work. I think it kind of makes sense, right? Because a lot of people like me don't want to come back and relive those kind of traumatic experiences. And that's why it's up to you, nurses. When you interact with EMTs and paramedics, please remember that they're doing some incredible work out in the field too. And pass along some gratitude. Say it's from me. So again, I woke up that next morning and I can't even ask the question, what happened due to this trach in my throat? So how do you communicate when you can't talk? You can write, right? Some people say sign language, which would be awesome if I actually knew sign language. So for me, maybe it was because I was as helpless as a child, or maybe it was because I was stoned out of my mind on narcotics, but I start flashing back to being a little kid growing up watching Sesame Street. Am I the only person who grew up watching Sesame Street? No, okay. So if you grew up watching Sesame Street, do you remember how Kermit the Frog used to take his magic pointy finger and he would draw out letters on the TV screen to teach us our ABCs? Remember that? He'd make a T going, doo, right? So I'm taking my magic pointy finger and I'm writing out on the bed sheets, who are you, where am I? It takes me 18 years to figure out that I do not have a magic pointy finger. So finally, one of my nurses says, okay, Marcus, I know you're trying to talk to me, but I don't know what you're saying. She said, let's try this. I'm going to ask you yes or no questions, and if you want to answer yes, hold up one finger. If you want to answer no, hold up two. She came back a little later saying, Marcus, do you want me to give you a shot for pain? Yes. And she came back and said, do you want me to lower the back of your bed so you'll be more comfortable? I'd hold up two fingers. No, I'm okay. Now, friends, at this point in time, I am so incredibly injured that the drugs don't touch the pain, the position of the bed doesn't take away the pain. The only thing that helps a little bit is if I lay absolutely motionless. If I did not move, it wouldn't hurt quite so much. But if somebody bumped the side of my bed or laid a hand on my bed, it would throw off that whole sense of balance. And when that would happen, my head would involuntarily roll from one side to the other. And as gross as this is, I could actually feel and hear fluid sloshing around in the back of my skull. And then a doctor came in to examine me. And this guy didn't get the memo, right? So he came in, laid across the side of my bed, my body flops over to the side, and I'm taking my fist, pounding it in the mattress, trying to get him to stop. Man has the audacity to look up and say, oh, did that hurt? So I held up one finger to show him how much it hurt. And now I can say three things, right? So that's still not very much. So the person who got me talking, let's put that in air quotes for the first time, was my aunt. My aunt's name is Elaine. She was an operating room nurse at Cook County Hospital in Chicago. Knowing how badly that I had been hurt, when she came to the hospital, brought along a bunch of those yellow legal tablets, pens and pencils, thinking I could write out my answers to everybody. So she came into the room, gave me a pen, gave me a pad of paper, and said, can you write your name? So I wrote my name. It literally took me 2 or 3 years to fully admit to myself that when Elaine asked me to write my name, it wasn't just so she could see if she could read my handwriting. What do you think she was doing? Cognitive assessment, maybe? And when I could properly execute that command, it was the first indication that my family had that every bone in my face had been crushed. My brain is a half an inch away, and there's no traumatic brain injury. You can call that a miracle if you'd like. I do. And it was through that written communication that Elaine said, Marcus, Saturday night, you and Tom and Kim and Vince were going home from the hockey game. You guys got broadsided at Hampton and Chippewa. There were 3 people in the other car that hit you. And I asked, were the people in the other car drunk? And she said, yes, they were. And you might think that that would make a big difference to me, and it might have on a normal day. But this was not a normal day. The only thing I wanted was to stop hurting. And that piece of information had to take a back seat to just wanting to be still and pain-free. A few days later, I had the opportunity to pick up that pencil again. By the way, here's a random question. Do you know anybody dumb? Does that mean yes? All right. You sitting next to anybody dumb? No, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. Here's another one. Have you ever had to be under the care of somebody dumb? Yeah, that's harder to deal with, isn't it? So while I was, a couple days later, I had to interact with a couple of healthcare professionals, ophthalmologists actually, who I thought they were dumb. And this is the day that these two ophthalmologists came in, sat on both sides of my bed, Lubineski on my left, Del Priori on my right, and they said, Marcus, do you know that we did an operation on your eyes yesterday? Yes, I know. They said we had to go inside, look at the damage that was done to know if we would have any hope of saving even a small fraction of your sight. And unfortunately, when we got inside and looked around, we quickly realized there's nothing we can do to save even a portion of your vision. So it's probably not going to be a big surprise to you, but I have been through a lot of counseling. And by the way, I'm so glad we're in 2018 now, right? Because remember back in the day, it was like, oh, you know who goes to counseling? Crazy people. I disagree with that, right? You know who goes to counseling? Smart people. Smart people who have been hurt and who do not want that hurt to govern the rest of their life. So one of the things that I learned very early on in my counseling career was a little phrase, it's kind of counseling 101, some of you probably know it, a little phrase that says, hurting people do what? Hurt people. Hurting people hurt people. And when these surgeons told me that I would never see again, I wanted to hurt them. All of us in the animal kingdom, we have the 2 F's that are built into our psyche, right? When we feel threatened or vulnerable or backed into a corner at risk, what happens? Fight or flight, right? And when these surgeons tell me I'll never see again, I want flight. I want to flee. I want to go running out of the room away from this horrible information. Got a couple of problems here. Number 1, I'm blind. Number 2, I've got both legs. I've got a dislocated right hip and a double compound break in my left leg. Both of my legs are up in traction above the bed. I can't flee anywhere. So what's left? Fight. Can I fight? I mean, I am so injured at this time, I can barely grip a pencil and write out things on a pad of paper, much less thinking I'm going to make a fist and land a punch. So what do I have left to fight with? I've got words. Now, have we all reached that stage in life where we now know that words can hurt more than a fist? And so I wrote out every horrible, mean thing I could to these surgeons. I'm asking them things like, how can you even call yourself a doctor? How can you even look at yourself in the mirror if you can't fix me? And don't you think that those surgeons had to hate their inability as much as I did? They are, after all, ophthalmologists, right? And with the last thing I had left in my arsenal, I scrawled out as big and as dark as I could across that page, I hate you. Do you think I actually hate those surgeons? Of course not, of course not. But hurting people hurt people. Are the patients that you serve hurting? Absolutely. Are the families of those patients also hurting? Absolutely. And it's not a question of if this ever happens to you, it's a question of when a patient or a family member takes out their anger and their resentment on you. I hope you don't take that personally. I hope you can remember that little phrase, hurting people hurt people, and that you can give those people a little more grace. About a week and a half post-trauma. Oh, by the way, I am a bibliophile. Anybody else a bibliophile? Nodding, yes. Some of you are bibliophiles and you just don't know it. Bibliophile is a lover of books, exactly. So I've written 4 or 5 books, hopefully have another one coming out this year. I usually read 50 or so books a year. I love the spoken word. I love the written word. I'm a constant blogger. I'm completely addicted to social media, and I know some of you are too. And by the way, speaking of social media, can I take your picture? Because I'm gonna put you all on Twitter and Instagram. All right, so everybody over here, wave. All right, now everybody down the middle, wave. Now everybody over here, wave. Now I'm gonna do a selfie with y'all in the background. All right, very good. So you'll find those on Instagram and Twitter under #BlindGuyPictures. I'm not kidding, you really will. By the way, Elliot now has his own Instagram. It's the most adorable thing ever. It's called The Blonde Leading the Blind. And it's all these super cute pictures of Elliot on airplanes and in hotels and in restaurants and on stage and such like that. So anyway, oh, by the way, while we're talking about this, will you guys do me a huge favor? Will you sign up to be my friend on Facebook? Because it'll make me feel really popular to have a lot of friends. So anyway, I love the written and spoken word. Well, about a week and a half post-trauma, I am getting ready to head into my first facial reconstruction. And the plastic surgeons had told my parents that this operation would take between 20 and 25 hours. And so while my parents are getting this talking to by the plastic surgeons, I am being prepped for that next day's big surgery by a couple of nurses and a couple of CNAs. And the first nurse comes in and asks me, she said, "Marcus, you've been in the hospital now for almost 2 weeks." She said, "Since you were admitted, have you had a bowel movement?" And I have my pencil and I ask, "What's a bowel movement?" And she pauses for a minute and she says, "Well, have you defecated?" And I ask, "What's defecated?" And so finally, one of my more astute caregivers says, "Marcus, have you gone poop?" "Oh, no, I have not." And they said, "Well, you're going to have to poop before this big surgery tomorrow." "But I don't have to poop." And they said, "Well, that's why we're going to give you a suppository." And you can say it with me, what's a suppository? So it takes them about a half an hour to roll me over in bed and put this thing where the sun don't shine. And while it is melting inside of me, I've got my pencil, I got my pad of paper, and I write out what is quite possibly the most profound statement of my literary career thus far. My butt cheeks are greasy. And you may be asking yourself the question, "Marcus, why are you telling us this story?" All right, simple reason. In our world of healthcare, do we speak a certain language? And what is much of that language rooted in? What's that? Gobbledygook, okay. I was going to say Latin, but gobbledygook works too, right? In medical terms, how many abbreviations do you use every day on the job? How many acronyms do you use? Nicknames for procedures and equipment? Lots, right? This is your language. Is this language known by patients like me? It is not. And so I hope that when you're talking with patients and families, we can break down that level of understanding to the lowest common denominator, which is understandability. I want to take a moment to show off my wedding ring. Sexy, huh? So I got married, let's see, it'll be 11 years in July. And whenever I got married, I not only got my wife, but I also inherited 3 stepchildren. Teenage stepchildren. Y'all feel my pain? All right, so I got to tell you that in the years that I've been these kids' stepdad, I have learned a depth of love that I didn't even know existed. And I'm a step-parent, right? I'm not a quote-unquote real parent. I didn't conceive these kids. I wasn't there when they said their first words and took their first steps, and I didn't have to sit through their boring t-ball games and ballerina recitals and they're looking, oh gosh, that's just torture to me. You know what my version of hell is? A middle school band concert. It's Twinkle Twinkle being played out of tune over and over for eternity. Okay, so I don't know what it's like to be a quote unquote real parent like my mom and dad who got that call middle of the night saying you need to come to the hospital. When they got to the hospital, they were met by a nurse who walked them down a corridor, stopped outside of a closed exam room door and said, Marcus is inside of here, but you guys don't have to go inside if you don't want to. How many of you guys are parents? Okay, good, we're catching on. Let me ask you, if your child was suffering on the other side of that door, is there anything that could be done to keep you out? No. Do you think that that nurse intended for her words to be hurtful to my mom and dad? No. I don't think so either. In fact, she was trying to protect them. But if we all know this, during times of extreme stress, you take a little nap, Ariel. During times of extreme stress, everything goes on high alert, right? Our eyes take in more information, our hearing becomes more acute, our skin is more sensitive. And that's why during these times of high stress, it is so super important that we're not only aware of our words, but our tone, our body language, because all it takes is the slightest little turn away from a patient or family, or maybe the little eye roll or the glance towards the door that a family or patient can perceive as disregard. We've got to be super aware of that. I came out of that first big surgery, and the first person I met post-op was a nurse named Barb. And in about 3 minutes, Barb became one of my favorite people. Now, please notice, I did not say she was one of my favorite nurses. She wasn't one of my favorite caregivers. She was one of my favorite people. Because Barb walked up to my bed, she shook my hand like there's nothing wrong with me. She said, hey, Marcus, my name is Barb, and I'm a nurse here in the ICU, and I get to take care of you for the next 8 hours. Did you catch that word? I get to take care of you. When we get to do something, what does that mean? We want to. It's a privilege, right? By Barb saying, I get to take care of you, it told me that she actually wanted to be there. My friends, do we get to work in this sacred field of healthcare and nursing? I hope you're nodding right now. This is sacred work. This is not manufacturing. This is not sales. This is not retail. This is human beings taking care of human beings. This is human beings taking care of the ill, the injured, and the dying. If there's more sacred work than that, I don't know what it is. Maybe parenting. Barb said, Marcus, I've been hearing about you around the hospital. I know that you had a terrible car accident. She said, I know that you just got out of a really big surgery. She said, I'm just curious, though. Had you ever had surgery before this wreck? And I wrote, yes, twice. She said, why did you have surgery? Hernias from football. And she said, well, where did you have those hernia repairs done? In my crotch. And she laughs too, and she said, I meant which hospital? Oh, my bad. And so I wrote out the name of the hospital. She's like, okay, Marcus. She's like, well, that's a good hospital in its own right. She said, but you know what? You are now in the best hospital. And Barb starts going down the list of accolades and recognition and awards that Barnes Hospital had received. What does that say to a patient like me? That I'm in a good place? I'm in a quality, competent facility known for its quality and competency? Do you guys have things here to brag about? Oh my gosh, yes you do. You're a magnet. What did I read? U.S. News and World Report, #1 hospital in North Carolina? Yeah, Barb's got some of those same bragging rights at her facility. Maybe not in North Carolina, but do we share that information with patients? If we do you think it might help color their perception of their experience of hospitalization? I think so. And if nothing else, let's be proud of where we work, right? Let's brag it up. Barb said, Marcus, you're not only in the best hospital, she said, you, sir, are on the best floor of the best hospital. She said, up here on 7400, we love what we do. She said, I get to take care of you for the next 8 hours, and then after me, Rick gets to take care of you. She said, Marcus, you're gonna love Rick. Rick is such a fantastic nurse. We call him the king of the ICU. And she said, after Rick, you're probably gonna meet Betty. Now, Betty is an LPN. She has worked on this floor for 20 years. She knows more than anybody else. She said, tomorrow you're probably going to meet Jamie. Jamie is the physical therapist that usually works with patients on our floor. You know, a lot of people say that PT doesn't stand for physical therapy, but PT instead stands for, I heard a lot of different things. Physical terrorist, right? Pain and torture, right? She said, not with Jamie. You're going to be having so much fun, you won't even realize it's therapy. She said, Rodney is the respiratory therapist that works with our patients. She said, Marcus, Rodney is the kindest man I have ever met. And he's got 2 twin little baby boys. You get him talking about his kids, he's going to talk your ear off. What is Barb doing for me? Managing up. I don't even know if managing up was a written theory when Barb was telling me this. But what does it say to me? Number one, it gives me information about the very people who are going to be laying hands on me, right? But secondly, Barb is so complimentary of her coworkers that it makes me think that she likes them. Now, is it important for patients like me to think that the members of their care team are friends? Why is that important? Communication, teamwork, collaboration, all those things, right? To me, it said, because there's a very scary time of day that usually happens twice a day in the life of an inpatient. And that is called shift change. You got it. So if Barb likes Rick, and Rick likes Betty, and Betty likes, if they all like one another, maybe when Barb is giving bedside report to Rick, if she likes him, maybe she'll spend a few extra minutes talking to him, and that lets me know that my transition of care is going to be smooth and seamless. And then Barb asks me a question that no one in the previous few weeks had even bothered to pose. She said, I can read what it says on your chart, but do you want me to call you Marcus or Mark? If I can, let me draw for you the picture that Barb was looking at. Post-op, my head was swollen up to the size of a basketball. I had a 2-inch wide swath of hair that had been shaved ear to ear over the crown of my skull with a foot-long incision running through that area and about 100 staples holding that incision closed. My eyelids were sewn shut, jaws were wired shut. I'd lost almost all of my teeth. Left side of my face was paralyzed. Left ear canal was cut clean in two. Left ear was basically just hanging on the side of my head. I've got a trach. I've got chest tubes. I've got both legs in traction. I am black and blue from head to foot. If you break this down, I am a blind, mute, immobile, and disfigured patient. And Barb takes the time to ask this sack of meat that she's going to be taking care of, what do you want me to call you? What does that say to me? She cares. She understands this is not a prognosis. This is not a diagnosis. This is not a procedure. This is a human being. And I was not going to miss an opportunity to assert my identity, so I wrote out Marcus or Mark. Either is fine, but spell my name with a C. And I underlined it a few times. And Barb said, all right, well, if it's okay with you, I'm going to call you Mark because I also have a teenage son named Mark. Now, how long did that entire interaction take? Few minutes? And it doesn't matter what hospital I go to around the country, how many healthcare professionals I meet, the systems that I get to keynote for. Everywhere I go, I hear one complaint. Actually, I hear a lot of complaints, but there's one common complaint, and that is always, I don't have enough time. There's never enough time to give that person-centric, compassionate, quality care that I want to give. And all I want to do is remind you that it does not take an inordinate amount of time to make that personal connection with a patient or family member. It doesn't take that long. It just takes being intentional in the moment. A week or two later, the phone by my bed rings, and I had just gotten my talking trach, my first talking trach, and I pick up and I answer the call. And even though my jaws are still wired shut, even though I'm slurring like a drunk, even though I can't feel hardly anything in my face, the person on the other end of the phone understands me perfectly. And that's because the caller was Barb. And Barb said, hey, Mark, I want to let you know that I'm not coming in tonight. Today's my day off. Barb always worked the midnight shift. In fact, Barb still works the midnight shift at the same hospital, on the same floor for the last 42 years. And she has no intention of retiring anytime soon. Barb said, it's my day off and I'm going down to Best Buy because today is my son Mark's birthday. She said, I know you've got a whole bunch of CDs up there in your room, but is there anything special I can pick up for you while I'm there? You don't really have to answer this, but how often do most people call into their place of employment on their day off asking if they can spend their hard-earned money on someone who has no means to repay them? I can't say that that never happens, but I think we can probably all agree it's rather rare. And I was so taken aback by Barb's kindness that I just kind of mumbled through an answer. I was like, no, don't worry about me. I'm totally fine. And she said, well, let me see what I can do. And that next night, she walked in the room, walked up to my bed, and she put 2 CDs in my hands. I still have those today. I'm not going to suggest that you go out and buy gifts for your patients or your families or your coworkers. But I hope that you can always remember that the greatest gift we can give another human being isn't a tangible item at all. the greatest gift we can give another human being is what Jennifer gave me that first night in the ER. It is a hand to hold. It is someone to be present. It's the use of those two words, I'm here, when another person is suffering. Day of my discharge finally rolled around. Day of my discharge happened to be Thanksgiving Day. Anybody been around the hospital on holidays? Tell me about it. Empty, quiet, skeleton crew, all that. The day of my discharge, I was a mess of emotions. Number one, I've been in college for a month and a half. Now I've been in the hospital for a month and a half. College felt like home. The hospital didn't exactly feel like home, but at least it felt safe. I had friends at college. Now I had friends in the hospital. My friends were my nurses. They were my docs. They were my PTs and OTs and RTs. They were the phlebotomists, dietary, EVS, volunteers, chaplains. These are the people that I interacted with every single day. And because it's a holiday, none of them are working. So I am not going to get to say goodbye and thank you to Barb and Rick and Betty and Stephanie and Jamie. And I'm not going to get to say goodbye to them. And the other thing that had me kind of messed up that day was the knowledge that as soon as I was discharged, I had to get into a vehicle again for the first time. I think it's understandable why that can bring about a little anxiety. Orderlies came into the room. We got the discharge papers signed. They lifted me up out of bed, sat me in a wheelchair. They helped my parents collect up the CDs and the medical equipment, the stuffed animals and the cards, and they piled it into a bunch of different wheelchairs, and we start to make this little grotesque parade down the hallway to the elevator. And I'm sitting there in front of the elevator. I am shaking. I've got tears coming down my face. I'm just not sure I'm ready to go. And after what seemed like an eternity, finally that elevator door opens, and instead of pushing me into the elevator, I hear footsteps walk out. And those footsteps walked up to the side of my chair, and the next thing I know, someone is leaning over, and that person is embracing me. And who do you think that might be? That would be Barb. And Barb said, Mark, I got a call from the nurse's station saying that you were going home today. She said, I left my family's Thanksgiving dinner to come down here because nobody is sending my kid home but me. How can I ever repay that amount of kindness? I only know of two ways. Number one, I can tell you these stories in hopes that it resonates with you while you have chosen to dedicate your life to this sacred field of nursing. And the second thing I knew I could do for Barb was this. Is that right side up? All right, good. Sometimes I get lucky. So this is one of my books. It's called I'm Here, Compassionate Communication and Patient Care. One of the crowning moments of my life was when this book first came out. I was able to present Barb with the first book off the press. And as she started flipping through it, she came to the dedication page to find that the book had been dedicated to her. However, the book wasn't just dedicated to Barb, it was also dedicated to the memory of her son, Mark, who passed away at 24 years old from an extremely rare form of cancer. And I've done enough work with MAD over the years to know that if you want to honor someone who has a child who is deceased, you help that child's memory live on. At this point, I think there's 60 or 70 nursing schools around the country using this book in curriculum. I think we sold 120,000 copies. More than anything, I just really hope that this leaves a great legacy for Barb and Mark. This is my other healthcare-specific book called The Other End of the Stethoscope. This one happens to be dedicated to my aunt, Elaine, the RN, who literally took care of me from day one, changed my diapers, and then helped change my diapers when I was 18. Also, a lot of nursing schools and allied health programs using this. Just out of curiosity, is today anybody's birthday? Don't raise your hands. Anybody's birthday this week? Yours is? What's your name?
Sally.
What is it?
Sally.
Sally. Hey, Sally, I want to make your birthday a little bit better to make sure that you walk out of here with a complimentary copy of both books. And if anybody else, I think everybody got a copy of either I'm Here or Stetho, is that right? Okay. When we're finished up here, I'll be out at the book table. I'll be happy to sign your books. Feel free to grab your I'm Here bands. Elliot will also be out of his harness, and you can get some doggy lovin' if you would so like. I know we're kind of running late on time here, so can I have like 90 seconds to tell you guys one last real quick story? Okay. So the day that those two ophthalmologists told me that I would never see again, I had such an outpouring of emotion and adrenaline that I just ended up passing out. A couple hours later, I woke up and I looked around the room. Exactly. I realized I can't look around the room. I am never going to be able to look around the room again. And I had my pencil and my pad of paper, and I wrote out that one word question that so many people ask when something horrible happens to them. That question that has no answer is, why? Why did this happen to me? Why do I have to be the one to deal with this? Here's my question for you. Did you get anything out of what I talked about today? Okay, if you did, thank you. First, thank you for being present in this room today. Second, thank you for dedicating your professional life to taking care of patients like me. And lastly, thank you from me, because if you got something out of this that you can apply to your professional or your personal life, to me, that is the answer to that question of why. Thank you guys so much, and have a wonderful rest of your Nurses Week. Appreciate it.